On my wedding night, my husband, Gavin, died suddenly in bed, leaving me a multi-billion-dollar estate. Everyone urged me to remarry while I was still young. My best friend even secretly set me up with a guy, broad shoulders, narrow waist. He wasn't as handsome or wealthy as Gavin, but he was young and attentive. On the day he proposed to me, floating live chat comments suddenly flared across my vision. Don't accept the proposal. Your best friend introduced him on purpose. She knows your late husband's spirit is right beside you. The second you take that ring, you confirm you're a gold-digging, unfaithful snake. Your ex-husband turns completely dark from betrayal. When he returns to life, you're the first one he strangles. And your best friend saves his broken soul, claiming his devotion and his billions for herself. They live happily ever after for 40 years, a storybook romance. Looking at the man holding out a diamond ring, I paused for a few seconds and chose to believe the floating text. I slapped him across the face. Dylan clutched his cheek, reflexively shouting at me. Are you out of your mind? I'm asking you to marry me. What the hell is wrong with you? I didn't have time to process his sudden shift in demeanor. Gavin was a possessively intense man. When he was 5, he got into a fight at school. His father boasted that with their wealth, he could have anything in the world, yet Gavin only ever clung to me. That was when I gained a brother. He took care of me like a mini-adult. From the time I was 1 until I turned 18, even my mother complained that he kept too tight a leash on me. Gavin never paid her any mind. When I was 19, a local thug on the street merely whistled at me. Gavin had every delinquent in the neighborhood run out of Charleston overnight, a move that kept the city on the top safest cities list for 5 consecutive years. Honestly, at first I didn't believe the floating text overlay. Because on our wedding night, I had held Gavin until his body turned ice cold and rigid. I watched with my own eyes as his coffin was sealed and lowered into the ground. But considering I was literally seeing floating text in midair, something equally absurd, what if it was real? Realizing Gavin's ghost had been watching me with Dylan for 3 months made me shudder uncontrollably. Even the gentle breeze felt frigid. Cass, my best friend, Whitney, looked at me in total confusion. You and Dylan have been together for months. You said it yourself, you two fit together like a favorite sweater. Isn't marriage the natural next step? What's going on with you? Before I could answer, a burst of text rolled across my field of vision out of the corner of my eye. A chill ran down my spine. Saying you fit together like old clothes right in front of the dead husband? She's implying you're completely intimate inside and out. For 3 months, he's been following you. He's heard plenty of this. Accepting the ring is the final straw that breaks him. In hindsight, I realized Whitney had constantly dropped loaded, suggestive hints in front of me. I had never actually done anything with Dylan. I used to think it was just cheeky girl talk between best friends. Now I saw it clearly. If Gavin's ghost was truly standing beside me, she was deliberately provoking him, trying to turn his devotion into toxic hatred toward me. When did I ever say that? It was perhaps the first time I had ever called her out. Whitney's face froze slightly. Well, Whitney's not wrong, Dylan said, his expression a mix of confusion and impatience. We were bound to be that close sooner or later. What is wrong with you today? I love you, and you love me. Why won't you accept my proposal? Don't you want me by your side? Could you really bear to walk away from us? More comments flashed in the air. The girl he actually loves is your best friend. He even bought the ring in her size, then lied saying he was nervous and got the wrong size. 3 days. He revives in 3 days. Don't fall for their words. I grabbed the ring from Dylan's hand. Ignoring the barrage of glowing text, I slid it onto my best friend's ring finger. A perfect, flawless fit. Dylan visibly panicked. It was my first time proposing. I was so nervous that I got the wrong size. Even his exact line matched the text. A deep dread settled in my chest. If the comments were right about Gavin returning in 3 days, and if I had accepted Dylan's proposal, I wouldn't just miss out on the multi-billion-dollar estate, I'd be choked to death by a husband consumed by vengeance. If he was coming back in 3 days, I'd wait and see if it was real. You've misunderstood, I said coldly, looking at Dylan's expectant face. I only ever saw you as a friend. A friend? Dylan looked utterly stunned. A moment later, he grabbed my hand, adopting a helpless, patient tone. Cass, don't be petty. I know you're upset about the ring. We can go pick out a new one right now. Whitney also took my hand, smiling gently. He's right. He was just nervous. Just say yes so you two can get married, then my mind will finally be at ease. Of course she'll be at ease. Once the ring is on, your ex-husband goes on a killing spree. She's ruthless. And you never did a single thing to wrong her. Looking at the face I had known for 10 years, I suddenly felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. Why are you so desperate for me to marry him? Whitney blinked, caught off guard. What has gotten into you today? Didn't you always say how much you liked Dylan? You said he was young, that you were sick of Gavin's old man energy, that you and Dylan. Gavin was only 2 years older than me, but his demeanor made him seem far more mature. He loved buying me soft, pastel-colored clothes. Outsiders often misunderstood, thinking he was much older. Once, an admirer taunted him, calling him an old man, which drove Gavin so wild with fury he ended up hospitalized from high blood pressure. I'm older than you, he had once whispered to me. If I die before you, there won't be anyone left to protect you. That had always been a thorn in his heart. And I had never once expressed disgust toward him. She was fabricating lies. Gritting my teeth, I slapped Whitney hard across the face. The next second, Dylan shoved me to the ground. Are you insane? Whitney isn't in good health, how could you hit her? He pulled the startled Whitney into his arms, his eyes brimming with concern. He didn't even glance down at me where I lay on the floor. I wasn't stupid, I knew where his true priorities lay. The ring was my mistake, Dylan snapped. If you're mad, take it out on me. Don't blame Whitney. In his haste, all his masks slipped away. Dylan didn't love me at all. I said nothing, looking down at my scraped, swelling knee. Noticing my injury, Dylan froze for a split second, then belatedly came over to pull me up, guilt flickering in his eyes. I'm sorry, Cass. Let me take you to the hospital right now. I dodged his reaching hand. Whitney looked so pale. You should take her first. Dylan opened his mouth, thought of something, and nodded hastily. Fine. I'll drop Whitney at urgent care, then come back for you. We'll go pick out a ring together afterward. He swept Whitney up into his arms and rushed off. When I went to the urgent care clinic to get my knee bandaged, I ran into them again. Dylan was leaning over Whitney, gently massaging her temples with his thumb, just as he used to do for me. After Gavin died, I had been consumed by grief. A multi-billion-dollar fortune dropped into the lap of an unprotected woman was a ticking time bomb. Extended relatives hurled insults and plotted against me, combined with the grief of losing my husband, I hadn't even dared to step out of the house. That was when Whitney brought Dylan into my life. He stayed by my side, pulling me out of the dark shadow. I loved Gavin, but he was gone, I had no choice but to bury my love deep inside. I had genuinely believed Dylan was sincere. Cass. Dylan's eyes lit up when he saw me, and he walked over quickly. Don't worry, Whitney's fine, she was just startled. Let's go pick out a ring now. Whitney has great taste, she'll help pick the best one for you. I'm not marrying you, I said flatly. His expression stiffened. I made one small mistake, why can't you forgive me? To marry you, I even sold my childhood home in my hometown just to put down a deposit on a townhouse for us. He pulled a keycard from his pocket and offered it to me. Cass, I'll work hard to be a good husband and make you forget all your past pain. Yeah, and you get to pay the mortgage while he never works a day in his life. He'll demand the newest sports car, and when you die, he won't even claim your body. I let out a cold laugh. Did you buy it in full? Dylan looked like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Well, it's a mortgage, but I'll pay it off myself. Cass, you have to trust me. Whitney suddenly let out a soft sigh. I know you care about money, Cass. Back then, you told me that if Gavin hadn't been so wealthy, you never would have married a controlling freak like him. You said Dylan was different, that you actually loved Dylan, but never loved Gavin. I smiled coldly. Whitney's expression relaxed slightly, thinking she had one. Once you and Dylan are married, you'll be family. Who pays the mortgage doesn't matter. Dylan smiled too. Yeah, we're family. Don't be so distant. As for Gavin, stop dwelling on him. You hated how he controlled every aspect of your life anyway. Now that he's dead, you should be happy. No one can stop us from being together now. Wife using her own money to support another man, the ex-husband is about to pass out from rage. Stop digging your own grave. Tell these two snakes to get lost. Finished? I asked quietly. Dylan blinked, nodding. The next second, I slapped him across the face. Whitney gasped. Before she could speak, I slapped her too. You helped me through my grief, and I appreciated that. But you have no right to insult Gavin. I loved him with everything I had, and I never, ever resented him. I glared at Whitney. You keep fabricating these vicious lies. Anyone listening would think Gavin's ghost was standing right here, and you were deliberately trying to make him hate me. Whitney's eyes quivered. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Gavin is dead. How could he be here? And you did say those things. You just forgot. I didn't bother arguing further. The more said, the worse it got. If Gavin really was beside me, these lies were slashing at his heart. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Dylan yelled in frustration, Cassidy. I've already notified both our families. The invitations are sent out. The wedding is in 2 days. Go home and pull yourself together. Don't make your mother worry, her health isn't good. I returned to the estate Gavin and I had shared. The staff stayed on the ground floor, I was alone on the second floor. Lying in bed, I felt an icy chill permeating the entire room. Your ex-husband is staring right at you. Seeing the text, panic surged through me. I frantically pulled out Gavin's framed photograph, clutching it to my chest as I declared to the empty room, Gavin, my love, you're the only one I've ever loved, from start to finish. Eventually, I drifted into a fitful sleep, only to see Gavin in my dream. His obsidian eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. His icy fingers clamped around my jaw, repeating over and over, "You lied to me." My lips trembled as I tried to explain, but suddenly his hands shifted to my throat, squeezing tightly. Ah! I snapped open my eyes, gasping for air. Drenched in cold sweat, I ran to the bathroom mirror. There were no marks on my neck, but the sensation of suffocation was terrifyingly real. No. I didn't take Dylan's ring. Gavin won't kill me. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to reassure myself. Dylan hadn't just invited relatives, he had sent invitations to his former college classmates and even leaked news to online followers who tracked my life after Gavin's death. A widow moving on after just 3 months? Online commentators assumed I had trapped Gavin in a honeypot scheme, swarming my social media accounts to label me a husband-killing leech. Trembling with anger, I posted a video clarifying that I had no intention of ever remarrying. Nobody believed me. To catch a break, I went back to my mother's home. My mother had cooked a full table of dishes. Just as I picked up my fork to eat, the floating comments flared again. Your mom is furious that you won't give your money for your brother's wedding dowry, so she sold you out. The food is laced with muscle relaxants. Once you eat, she's dragging you straight to the venue to marry Dylan. He paid her $500,000 in cash. Whether you want to or not, you're getting married. Your ex-husband is about to go full villain mode. My hand froze in midair. I hadn't given my brother money because his girlfriend was a known scammer. I didn't want my family swindled. Besides, during our marriage, Gavin had given my family generous financial support, telling me he would take care of my parents so I wouldn't have to stress. And now, my own mother was selling me out for $500,000. Mom, I said, setting my fork down. I'm not marrying Dylan. Her face instantly turned dark. She clutched her chest, gasping as if suffocated by grief. My heart pinched, but before I could speak, she snapped, "If you don't marry him, who else will take you? Look at the internet, everyone says you cursed your husband. If you don't marry Dylan, you'll die alone. The venue is booked. The invites are out. If you refuse now, you'll make our entire family a laughingstock. Parents decide marriage. If I say you marry, you marry." I gripped my fork tightly, my heart turning to ice. I'm leaving. The moment I stood up, darkness swept over my eyes, and I collapsed onto the floor. Good thing I put some in the incense room diffuser too, my mother chuckled triumphantly. She locked me in the attic for 2 full days. Strangely, during those 2 days, the floating text didn't appear once. Until my mother dragged me to the wedding venue. Through the bustling crowd, my eyes caught a tall, familiar figure standing near the back. Gavin had actually returned to life. Everything the comments said was true. Thinking about how Whitney and Dylan had spent the last 3 months manipulating me, treating me like a naive fool, tears stung my eyes. Instinctively, I took a step toward Gavin. Cass. Dylan grabbed my hand, forcing his fingers through mine in a tight grip. To onlookers, we looked like a doting couple. I knew you'd come. You do love me after all. I looked into Gavin's distant eyes. My teeth chattered, but I lacked the physical strength to shake Dylan off. Dylan, are you insane? I never agreed to. He squeezed my shoulder so hard I thought the bone would snap, though he maintained a bright, loving smile, the picture of a devoted groom whispering sweet nothings to his bride. Be good now. It's time for our ceremony. He dragged me onto the stage. I turned my head, silently pleading toward Gavin with my eyes. If he had been following me as a ghost, he had to know I was being forced. I didn't want to die. Gavin. Before I could say more, Whitney stepped up, blocking my view. Are you out of your mind, Cass? Gavin is dead. The man standing beside you now is Dylan, your husband. I was brought up to the altar by Dylan and Whitney. Gavin remained in the crowd, watching me silently. His expression was unreadable, but a bone-chilling coldness swept through me. He didn't believe me. Why would he? Dylan and Whitney had staged everything so convincingly. But I refused to accept this fate. Mustering every ounce of strength left in my body, biting my lip until blood pooled in my mouth, I forcefully shoved Dylan and Whitney away. I won't marry him. Cassidy. Whitney shouted, her voice shrill with reprimand. Stop acting out. You're over 3 months pregnant. Do you want your baby to be born without a father? My head thundered. I stared at her in utter disbelief. What ridiculous lie are you telling now? I'm not pregnant. Whitney's mother stepped forward, sighing dramatically. Cass, how can you lie like that? I personally accompanied you for your ultrasound yesterday. The paperwork is right here. The ultrasound scan was suddenly projected onto the large screen behind the altar. Before I could open my mouth, the room exploded into whispers and gasps. Gavin's only been dead 3 months, and she's nearly 4 months along? That means she was cheating on him while he was alive. How shameless. How could she take his inheritance after betraying him like that? If Gavin knew, he'd rise from the grave just to tear her apart. Vicious accusations and pointing fingers assailed my ears. I shouted explanations, even beating my own stomach to prove I wasn't pregnant, but nobody listened. Honey, I beg you. Dylan fell to his knees before me, his eyes bloodshot, performing his role to perfection. It's my fault for upsetting you, but please don't hurt our child. Seeing me stand motionless, my mother rushed up and slapped me hard across the face. Have you had enough? She shrieked. You're carrying his child. How much longer are you going to throw a tantrum? Haven't you humiliated us enough? With a reputation like yours, Dylan is the only decent man willing to take you. My cheek burned with sharp pain. A bitter realization washed over me. Nothing I said mattered. Whitney wanted Gavin to see me as an unfaithful monster so he would kill me, leaving her to claim the status of his wealthy widow. Dylan loved Whitney, so he danced to her tune. My biological mother hated me for withholding money from my brother, so she sold me out for $500,000. And Gavin had witnessed what looked like complete betrayal by his wife. They all wanted a specific narrative. Nobody cared about the truth. Through the noise, a man wearing a black face mask stepped out from the crowd and stopped right in front of me. Remembering the floating text, the dream, and the terrifying sensation of being strangled, I began to tremble uncontrollably. How could you not believe me? I gasped, tears falling. I thought you were dead. Dylan and I. Red veins streaked his dark eyes. His vein-popped hand lifted, tracing lightly across my cheek before he whispered, "Congratulations." Then, his fingers closed brutally around my throat. The familiar feeling of suffocation returned. I gripped his wrist with all my remaining strength, forcing out a single sentence through my constricted airway. In an instant, the expressions on everyone's faces changed. The breath caught in my throat, hot and tearing, but my eyes never left his. Even through the black fabric of the mask, even with the crimson spider threads of fury bleeding through his obsidian eyes, it was him. Gavin. The boy who had broken a delinquent's jaw at age 12 because someone bumped my shoulder, the man who had slid a platinum band onto my finger on our wedding night before his pulse simply flatlined beneath my palms. His fingers clamped down harder, the cold metal of his signet ring biting into the soft skin beneath my jaw. The guests were screaming, gasping, backing away. My mother was shrieking for security. Dylan was lunging forward, shouting theatrical words of rescue, while Whitney watched with a breathless, half-parted smile of suppressed euphoria. I didn't fight his grip. I didn't claw at his hands. I raised my own trembling, bruised palms and pressed them flat against his broad chest, right over where his heart should be. Gavin. I forced the words past my crushed vocal cords, each syllable scraping like glass. If you really watched me for 3 months, look at my hand. His ring was bought for Whitney. The entire ballroom seemed to freeze. His grip did not loosen, but the manic tremor in his fingers abruptly halted. His eyes narrowed to razor-thin slits. You know my body, I gasped out, tears finally spilling over my lashes, hot against his icy knuckles. You know I was never pregnant. And if you're going to kill me, do it. But don't you dare let them tell you I betrayed you. A heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the stage. Floating text flared across my vision, violent and neon bright. Target sanity bar rising from 0% to 15%. He remembers. The ring on Whitney's finger. The metadata on Dylan's credit card statement. Hold on. Cassidy. The medical team he planted in the ballroom is ready. Dylan rushed forward, trying to grab Gavin's arm. Hey. Who the hell are you? Get your filthy hands off my bride. Security, tackle him. Gavin didn't look at Dylan. With a movement so fast and fluid it looked inhuman. Gavin's free arm swung outward. His elbow caught Dylan squarely in the chest. There was a sickening crack, and Dylan flew backward 3 yards, smashing into the 4-tier wedding cake. Glass, white fondant, and spun sugar rained down as Dylan lay groaning, clutching his cracked ribs. Gavin slowly lowered his hand from my throat. Air rushed back into my lungs. I crumpled, coughing violently, but before my knees hit the carpet, his arms slid around my waist. He hauled me against his chest with bruising possessiveness, tucking my head under his chin. He smelled of cedarwood, winter rain, and the faint, unmistakable antiseptic of an ICU ward. He reached up with his left hand and pulled down his mask. A collective, blood-curdling shriek tore through the venue. Gee, Gavin, my mother stammered, stumbling back until her heels caught on the altar steps. You're dead. We buried you. The casket was sealed. Whitney's face drained of every drop of color. Her lips trembled so violently she couldn't form a word. The ring on her right hand, the one Dylan had custom ordered for her, sparkled under the chandelier lights like a mocking spotlight. Dead? Gavin's voice was lower than I remembered, rough and gravelly, carrying the resonance of someone who had climbed out of the underworld purely on spite. Did you think 3 months of neurotoxin-induced coma would keep me in the dirt, Mrs. Vance? He glanced down at me. His fingers brushed against the red handprints on my neck, a flicker of raw agony and self-loathing passing through his dark gaze. before his cold mask snapped back into place. You put your hands on my wife, Gavin whispered, his voice dangerously soft as. He stared at my mother, then at Whitney, and finally at Dylan, who was writhing in the ruined cake. You forged medical records. You drugged her. Gavin, darling. Whitney suddenly cried out, her voice pitching into a desperate, high-strung sob as she took a trembling step toward him. You don't understand. Cassidy was the one who planned this. When you died, she couldn't wait to cash the checks. Dylan was just her tool. She made Dylan buy that ring for me to deflect suspicion. She told me you were cold, that you controlled her every breath, that she was finally free. Look at her lying through her teeth with zero shame. She literally spent $20,000 to bribe the ultrasound tech at St. Jude's. Gavin's personal assistant has already secured the original hospital database. I leaned against Gavin's chest, feeling the heavy, rhythmic pounding of his heart against my cheek. It was real. He was alive. The sheer, impossible relief made my knees buckle, but his arm tightened around my waist, refusing to let me fall. Whitney, I said, my voice hoarse from being strangled, but clear enough for every microphone in the room to catch. If Dylan bought that ring to deflect suspicion, why is the receipt in your handbag right now, paid from a joint account you and Dylan opened 2 months before Gavin even collapsed? Whitney's eyes widened in sheer panic. What are you talking about? Gavin didn't give her a chance to breathe. He snapped his fingers. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the banquet hall slammed open. A dozen men in charcoal gray suits marched in, escorting 2 people in handcuffs. One was the chief ultrasound technician from St. Jude's Hospital. The other was Dylan's personal banker. Behind them came Dr. Ronald, the city's top forensic pathologist and Gavin's lifelong private physician. Let's clear the air, Gavin said calmly. His thumb traced my jawline, wiping away a stray tear with surprising gentleness. Shall we? The ballroom was in utter chaos, but Gavin's security team cordoned off the exits within seconds. Nobody was leaving. Not the media Dylan had invited, not the distant relatives who had come to sneer at the shameless widow, and certainly not the conspirators. Dr. Ronald stepped onto the stage, holding a portable medical kit and a tablet synced to the ballroom's giant LED screen. Mr. Vance, Dr. Ronald announced formally. We have the original raw data from St. Jude's. The ultrasound projected on that screen 10 minutes ago belongs to a 34-year-old patient named Brenda Miller. The metadata was altered 36 hours ago using the login credentials of Dr. Harrison, who is currently in our custody. The screen behind the altar flickered. The fake ultrasound vanished, replaced by clear hospital surveillance footage from 2 days prior. On the high-definition feed, Whitney stood in a dimly lit hospital corridor, handing an envelope stuffed with cash to the technician. Beside her, Dylan was laughing, holding a coffee cup, casually leaning against the wall. Make sure the gestational age says 14 weeks, Whitney's recorded voice echoed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and damning. If the public thinks she was pregnant before Gavin died, she'll be torn apart by his family estate. Lawyers. She won't dare fight the marriage. A wave of gasps ripped through the audience. Reporters Dylan had invited to broadcast my shame instantly turned their telephoto lenses toward Whitney and Dylan, shutter clicks rattling like machine gun fire. Turn it off. Turn it off. Dylan screamed, scrambling up from the ruined cake. Icing smeared across his tailored suit. It's fake. It's an AI deepfake. Is the bank transfer an AI deepfake too? Gavin's chief assistant, Marcus, stepped forward, tapping a button on his remote. The screen shifted again. It displayed a detailed bank statement showing a wire transfer of $500,000 from Dylan's shell company account directly into an overseas trust account registered under my brother's name, authorized by my mother. Dylan, Gavin spoke, each word falling like an anvil. You sold your family's townhouse? No. You took out a predatory high-interest loan using Whitney's family assets as collateral, intending to pay it off the moment Cassidy signed over the power of attorney for the Vance estate. Floating text cascaded down. Get them. Show the mother's texts. Show how the mother bragged to her mahjong group that she was trading her useless daughter for her son's penthouse. I turned my head to look at my mother. She was trembling, her expensive pearl necklace shaking against her withered neck. When she met my eyes, there was no remorse, only the wild, feral fear of a gambler who had bet everything on a dead horse. Cassidy. My mother stammered, taking a step toward me, reaching out with hands that had locked me in an attic for 48 hours without water. Cassidy, I'm your mother. I was fooled. Dylan told me you were depressed, he said you needed a fresh start. I only did it for your own good. You put muscle relaxants in my food, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You lit an incense burner with crushed sedatives in my bedroom. You locked the door from the outside and ignored me when I begged for water. I was protecting you from gossip, she wailed, tears streaming down her makeup-crusted cheeks. Gavin, please. You know how much I cared for you when you were growing up. Cassidy is my daughter, you can't let her turn against her own flesh and blood. Gavin looked at her as if she were a roach beneath his shoe. When Cassidy was 6, Gavin said in a deadpan, chilling tone, you left her alone at a carnival because your son wanted ice cream across town. I was 8. I searched 6 blocks in the rain to find her crying behind a ticket booth. You have never been her mother. You were merely an inconvenience I tolerated because she loved you. He turned slightly, signaling his security detail. Take Mrs. Vance into custody for illegal drugging, unlawful imprisonment, and extortion. The district attorney already has the warrants. No. Cassidy. Tell him no. I'm your mother, she screamed as 2 burly guards clamped zip ties around her wrists, dragging her off the stage. Her manicured heels dragged against the white carpet, kicking wildly as the guests parted like the Red Sea to avoid being near her. Now, only Dylan and Whitney remained on the platform. Whitney was trembling so violently she dropped her bouquet. She looked at Gavin, her eyes pooling with artificial innocence, the exact look she had used on me for 10 years whenever she wanted to borrow money or steal an opportunity. Gavin, you were listening, weren't you? Whitney whispered, taking a cautious step forward, ignoring Dylan completely. You were there. You know Cassidy was slipping away from you. Even if Dylan and I made a mistake, my feelings for you were real. On your wedding night, before you collapsed, I was the one who checked on you first. I stayed by your side. A sharp, cruel smirk touched Gavin's lips. Yes, Gavin whispered. You checked on me first. Which is why you're being charged with attempted murder. The word murder dropped like a bomb in the room. Whitney froze. What? Bam. The poison in the wedding champagne. She thought she gave him a fatal dose of tetrodotoxin to inherit him through oval manipulation. Little did she know Gavin has a congenital enzyme deficiency that slowed his metabolism, mimicking brain death instead of killing him outright. 3 months ago, Gavin said, his voice ringing across the silent hall, the champagne glass brought to my private suite contained a synthetic cardiac inhibitor. You bought it through a dark web vendor in Munich, using Dylan's overseas crypto wallet. Dylan's jaw dropped. He whipped his head toward Whitney. You said that was a sleep aid. You said it would just make him faint so we could stage the paperwork. Shut up, Dylan. Shut up. Whitney screamed, lunging at Dylan and clawing at his face with manicured nails. You idiot. You swore you scrubbed the transaction logs. You told me we would split his billions. Dylan roared back, shoving her violently to the floor. You told me Cassidy was a naive pushover who would sign whatever we put in front of her. You dragged me into this. The illusion of their storybook romance, the one the floating text had warned me about, shattered into pathetic, sniveling pieces on the floor. 2 narcissists, cannibalizing each other the second the fire touched their skin. Gavin didn't even look at their squabble. He simply waved a hand. 4 armed officers from the Major Crimes Unit stepped onto the stage, flashing badges and reading Whitney and Dylan their Miranda rights. Dylan was sobbing, cake frosting mixing with tears on his suit, while Whitney stared at Gavin with eyes filled with venomous hatred. You think she loves you? Whitney shrieked as the handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She was terrified of you, Gavin. She flinched every time you entered the room. You're a monster, and she'll leave you the first chance she gets. Gavin's arm around my waist tightened until it bordered on painful. His body went rigid, a dark, suffocating aura radiating from him. I knew that insecurity. It was the deepest, ugliest wound in his soul. He was brilliant, extraordinarily wealthy, and undeniably powerful, but when it came to me, he was always that terrified 8-year-old boy who thought if he let go of my hand for even a second, the world would swallow me whole. Without hesitation, I turned in his arms. I raised both hands, cupping his cold, sharp jawline, and pulled his face down to mine. In front of 300 guests, dozens of flashing cameras, and the live stream drones hovering overhead, I kissed him. His lips were cold and stiff with shock, but the moment my mouth pressed against his, a shudder ran through his entire frame. The terrifying, murderous rage evaporated from his posture, replaced by a desperate, starving hunger. His hand came up to the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me so deep into the kiss that the entire room seemed to disappear. Floating text erupted across my vision like a fireworks display. Sanity bar, 100%. Overloaded. The villain's dark transformation has been successfully cancelled. Warning, possessive index rising to maximum level. Host, prepare your endurance. When he finally broke the kiss, his breath was ragged, his dark eyes dilated and burning with an intensity that made my skin tingle. Let's go home, I whispered against his lips. Gavin stared at me for 3 long seconds, as if verifying that I was flesh and blood, that I wasn't an illusion born of his 3 months of dark wandering. Then, without a word, he scooped me up into his arms, bridal style, and turned his back on the ruins of the wedding stage. Marcus, Gavin commanded over his shoulder as he carried me down the aisle. Yes, Mr. Vance. Raise Dylan's family business to the ground by dawn. And ensure Whitney's legal defense team doesn't get a single bail hearing. Understood, sir. The black Maybach glided through the iron gates of the Vance estate, cutting through the thick pine forest that isolated the property from the rest of Charleston. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. Gavin had not let go of my hand once during the 30-minute drive. His fingers were locked through mine with such force that my knuckles were white. He sat rigid, his eyes fixed on the tinted window, his jaw set like carved granite. I watched him quietly. He had lost weight. The sharp planes of his cheekbones were more pronounced, his collarbones jutting out beneath his crisp black shirt. The 3 months in a coma, followed by whatever harrowing process brought him back to consciousness, had taken a toll on his body, yet the sheer aura of authority around him remained undiminished. When the car stopped in front of the manor, Gavin stepped out first, turned, and lifted me out before my feet could touch the gravel. Gavin, I can walk, I said softly, my voice still slightly raspy. My knee is just a little scraped. No, he said flatly. He carried me up the grand marble staircase, past the bowing staff who looked as if they had seen a deity return from the grave, and straight into our master bedroom on the 2nd floor. He set me down gently on the king-sized bed, then immediately knelt on the floor before me. Without asking, he slipped off my ruined heels, tossing them into the corner. He rolled up the hem of my gown to inspect my knee. When his eyes caught the purple bruises Dylan's shove had left on my skin, his expression darkened, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitched beneath his ear. He touched you, Gavin whispered. It was an accident when he shoved me, I explained, reaching down to touch his hair. Gavin, look at me. He didn't look up. Instead, his hands moved to my waist, sliding beneath the silk fabric to check for other injuries. His touch was clinical at first, but as his warm skin met mine, his breathing hitched. For 84 days, Gavin murmured, his voice muffled against my lap, I was trapped in a vegetative paralysis. My mind was awake, Cassidy. My soul was tethered to this house, to you. I heard every word Whitney said. I saw him bring you flowers. I saw him sit where I used to sit. My heart broke. The floating text had said he was following me as a spirit, but the reality was even more horrific, a medically induced locked-in state where his consciousness wandered, tortured by the illusions orchestrated by the 2 people I had foolishly trusted. I didn't want the flowers, Gavin, I whispered, sliding off the edge of the bed to kneel on the floor with him, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck. I threw every single bouquet into the incinerator. I stayed in this room every night, holding your pillow until I cried myself to sleep. Gavin pulled back slightly, his dark eyes boring into mine. Then why did you agree to meet him at the restaurant? Why did you let your mother plan the wedding? I never agreed to marry him, I said, holding his gaze with absolute honesty. Whitney told me Dylan was just a friend helping with legal paperwork. When he pulled out that ring, I slapped him. When my mother asked me to marry him, I refused, and she drugged me. I fought every second of it. If you were watching, you had to see that I never once said yes. Gavin went dead still. I saw you slap him, he admitted, his voice dropping to a raw, gravelly timbre. I saw you slide the ring onto Whitney's finger. That was the moment, my heart rate spiked high enough to break the chemical coma. The doctors thought it was a seizure. It was rage. A faint, bittersweet smile touched my lips. You woke up from a coma, just to stop me from getting married? I woke up to kill him, Gavin corrected coldly. And if you had smiled at him on that stage, I would have killed you, then taken my own life so we could be buried in the same plot. Chills ran down my spine, not from fear, but from the terrifying, unyielding magnitude of his obsession. To anyone else, Gavin Vance was a monster, a ruthless billionaire whose possessiveness bordered on madness. But to me, who had grown up in the cold neglect of a mother who saw me as an asset and a brother who drained my life, Gavin's madness was the only absolute, unconditional sanctuary I had ever known. You won't have to kill anyone for that, I whispered, resting my forehead against his. I'm yours. I've always been yours. Gavin's breath shuddered. With a low, guttural sound, he pulled me against him. His mouth crashing down on mine with a ferocity that knocked the breath from my lungs. By the following morning, the outside world had turned into a slaughterhouse for the conspirators. The Vance Group's legal machinery, combined with Gavin's sudden resurrection, triggered a media earthquake across the country. Headlines screamed across every major news network. Tycoon Gavin Vance returns from clinical death, wife's former best friend charged with poisoning and conspiracy, the $500,000 betrayal, mother arrested for drugging daughter in staged wedding scam, Dylan Ross exposed, forged ultrasound, predatory loans, and illegal gambling debts. Sitting on the sunlit terrace of the estate, sipping hot tea, I watched the live updates on my tablet. Whitney's wealthy family had already released a public statement formally disowning her, revoking her trust fund, and refusing to post her $5 million bail. The evidence of her purchasing the chemical toxin from the dark web was airtight. She was facing 25 years to life for attempted premeditated murder. Dylan was in even worse shape. Once his creditors learned he was facing felony fraud charges and that Gavin Vance was personally overseeing the investigation, every underground lender he owed money to called in their debts simultaneously. Dylan had been transferred to a high-security remand facility after someone broke his left arm in the holding cell over an unpaid gambling marker. As for my mother and brother, Marcus stepped onto the terrace, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, holding a leather folder. Good morning, Mrs. Vance, Marcus bowed respectfully. Mr. Vance is currently concluding a briefing with the district attorney, but he asked me to present these documents for your signature. I set my cup down. What are they? The formal revocation of all financial trusts, property deeds, and corporate stipends previously granted to your maternal family. Marcus opened the folder, pointing to the designated lines. Your brother's penthouse in Uptown Charleston, purchased with Mr. Vance's funds 2 years ago, has been reclaimed under the breach of contract clause. The $500,000 cash bribe from Dylan has been seized by the state as evidence of money laundering. I looked at the paperwork. For years, I had allowed Gavin to support my mother and brother out of a naive sense of filial duty, believing that if I gave them enough, they would eventually love me. Now, looking at the black and white legal text, I felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, only a profound, liberating clarity. I picked up the pen and signed my name with a steady hand. Where is my brother now? I asked. His fiancée, the woman you warned him was a con artist, emptied his personal checking accounts the moment your mother was arrested and fled the country. Marcus replied with a subtle, icy smirk. He is currently residing in a low-income motel, working double shifts at a distribution warehouse to pay off his vehicle lease. Let him stay there, I said quietly, closing the folder. He has 2 hands and 2 feet. It's time he learned how much a dollar actually costs. Just then, the heavy glass doors of the terrace slid open. Gavin walked out, dressed in a charcoal gray tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed back. The pallor from his hospital stay had mostly faded, replaced by his usual commanding, razor-sharp presence. Marcus immediately took the folder, bowed, and excused himself. Gavin walked up behind my chair, his hands resting naturally on my shoulders. His thumb stroked the base of my neck, right over the faint, fading marks from yesterday. Are you satisfied? Gavin asked softly, his voice low against my ear. More than satisfied, I said, leaning my head back against his chest to look up at him. How did the meeting with the DA go? Whitney's trial is expedited. She won't see the light of day for 3 decades. Gavin bent down, kissing the crown of my head. Dylan will be sentenced for fraud and conspiracy next month. His sentence will be served in a state penitentiary where several of my associates manage the internal affairs. A subtle warning flashed across my vision. Dylan's prison life index, extremely miserable. Plotline fully corrected, the villainous and the scumbag have received their karmic retribution. Remaining task, mend the host's bond and ensure absolute emotional stability. I blinked, watching the glowing text slowly dissolve into thin air. Gavin, I said, turning around in the chair to face him. The text. I saw things while you were gone. Gavin's eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of things? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell him the complete truth. In this life, I was done keeping secrets. On the day Dylan proposed, I said, looking into his eyes, I started seeing floating words in the air. Like comments on a live video stream. They told me Dylan's ring was Whitney's size. They told me you were watching me. They told me. My mother drugged the food. I expected him to look at me with skepticism, or perhaps worry that the trauma had affected my mental state. Instead, Gavin knelt beside my chair, his expression deadpan and completely serious. Good, he said simply. I blinked. Good. You believe me? Why wouldn't I? Gavin took my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. When I was trapped in that coma, unable to move, unable to speak, my only thought, my only obsession, was reaching you. I cursed God, I cursed the universe, I tore at the walls of my own mind trying to send you a warning. If the cosmos had to rip open a tear in reality just to project my fury into your vision, then it did its job. I stared at him, a mix of awe and disbelief washing over me. To Gavin Vance, the supernatural wasn't a mystery, it was merely an obedient tool of his possessiveness. So, Gavin whispered, his lips curving into a slow, dangerously handsome smile. What did the word say about what I would do to you once we were alone? My cheeks flushed crimson. They said you were a jealous, terrifying villain who would lock me up. They weren't wrong about the first part, Gavin murmured, standing up and pulling me out of the chair into his arms. As for locking you up, that depends on how well you behave during our second honeymoon. 3 weeks later, Charleston was drenched in the golden light of early autumn. The media frenzy had finally quieted down, replaced by a deep, respectful silence whenever the name Vance was mentioned. The public had witnessed the total annihilation of those who dared cross Gavin, and the message was clear. Cassidy Vance was untouchable. On a private cliffside overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, a small, intimate altar was set up under an arch of white roses and lavender. There were no reporters. No distant relatives scheming for inheritance. No fake friends with venom behind their smiles. Only Dr. Ronald, Marcus, a few loyal house staff, and the ordained minister who had known Gavin since he was a boy. I stood before the mirror inside the cliffside pavilion, smoothing down the skirt of my new wedding gown. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating lace Dillons Mother had forced on me, nor the extravagant, stiff ball gown from my first wedding night. It was made of soft, flowing ivory silk, simple and elegant, cut precisely to my measurements. You look breathtaking, Mrs. Vance, Marcus said from the doorway, offering me a bouquet of fresh white lilies, my favorites. Thank you, Marcus, I smiled, taking the flowers. Is the groom ready? He has been pacing the altar for 45 minutes, Marcus replied with a rare, dry chuckle. He threatened to fire the minister twice for adjusting his pocket square too slowly. I laughed, a bright, genuine sound that hadn't left my chest in months. As I walked down the stone path toward the cliff edge, the gentle sea breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. At the end of the aisle, standing tall against the vast blue horizon, stood Gavin. He wore a bespoke navy suit, his broad shoulders squared, his gaze locked onto me the instant I appeared. There was no mask, no shadow of fury or vengeance in his eyes, only a profound, breathtaking devotion that made the rest of the world fade into insignificance. I reached the altar and placed my hand in his. His fingers were warm, steady, and wrapped around mine with an unbreakable grip. Dearly beloved, the minister began, his voice warm over the crash of the ocean waves below. We are gathered here to witness the renewal of a bond that death itself could not sever. As the minister spoke the timeless vows, Gavin didn't look at the minister once. His obsidian eyes remained fixed on my face, memorizing every line, every breath. Gavin Vance, the minister asked, do you take Cassidy to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? Not just for as long as we live, Gavin interrupted, his voice deep, steady, and carrying across the wind. In this life, in death, and in whatever comes after. She is mine, and I am hers. The minister smiled warmly. And do you, Cassidy, take Gavin? I do, I answered before he could finish the sentence. With all my heart. Forever. Gavin pulled a velvet box from his coat. Inside was a ring carved from a single piece of flawless blue diamond, catching the sun like a drop of captured sea. He slid it onto my left ring finger, a perfect, flawless fit. You may seal this vow with a kiss, the minister said. Gavin didn't wait. He pulled me into his arms, lifting me slightly off my feet, as his lips claimed mine against the backdrop of the endless ocean. In that moment, the final, faint trace of the floating text appeared in the sky. Above us, shimmering like gold dust in the sunlight. Destiny rewritten. Protagonist status, eternal bliss. Live stream. Disconnected. Goodbye, Cassidy. The letters dissolved into the blue sky, leaving only the warmth of the sun, the roar of the sea, and the steady, unbroken beat of the heart against mine. Gavin pulled back slightly, resting his forehead against mine, his thumb gently stroking my cheek. What are you looking at? He asked softly. Nothing, I smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him close once more. Just our future.